Welcome to the Author Your Life podcast, where you can write a new script for your life and become the hero of your story. I'm your host, David McRae. You are the author of your life. Let's get started.
All you have to decide is what to do with the time that is given to you.
In my experience, there's no such thing as luck.
It is not our abilities that show what we truly are. It is our choices.
Before we launch into the podcast, I'd like to tell you about my book, Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story. This is a book for people who are at a crossroads in life and want to make a fresh start. Judging by the fact that you're listening to this podcast, I suspect that you may well be one of those people. This book is going to help you to change your narrative and rewrite the scripts in life that are holding you back. This book covers the latest science and research showing you how to become the person you want to be and live the life that you want to live. I'd like to invite you to get this book not only because I feel it's a great book that's going to help you, but also it's going to support the podcast as well. I love podcasts, but sometimes all of those ads that you get can be really irrelevant and annoying when you just want to listen to a good piece of training or a good interview. So I therefore made the decision with my podcasts that number one, I wanted my podcast to be free so that everyone could listen to it, and number two, that I wasn't going to fund it through all these annoying and irrelevant adverts and commercials. Therefore, if you want to support the podcast and support all the things that I put out there for free, whether it be here on the podcast, my YouTube channel, other areas on social media, then buying a book is going to enable and help that process. So this is what we call a win-win scenario. By buying the book, you help to support my work and all the free stuff that I put out there, and you also get a really transformational book that's going to help you make those changes that you really want in your life. So if you feel you're someone who's at that crossroads in life, you're looking for a new direction, you're looking for a fresh start, then make sure you get this book. Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story is available on Amazon in ebook, paperback, and audiobook. Whatever your preferred medium, it's there for you to go get right now. Hello, story changers, and welcome back to another episode of the Author Your Life podcast. Today on the episode, we are making a return to interviews. Now, interviews is something we haven't had on the podcast for a while because, as many of you have been listening to, the podcast has really been focused on the last several months on my latest book, Author Your Life, Become the Hero of Your Story. Of course, the podcast shares the same name as the book. So over the past few months, I've been reading you excerpts from the book. I've been creating some training based upon some of the things in the book. And that's really been the focus for the past few months. And I hope you've enjoyed this focus, and I hope you've gotten a lot out of it. And a thank you to all of you who have supported the book, who've bought books for yourself, who've bought books for your friend. As I said a little earlier in a previous episode, the book did really, really well. I was able to take it on tour across the UK. Just before Christmas, we hit number one on Amazon in one of its categories, and that was really all that I could have ever have hoped for and expected for the book. So thank you all of you who've been on that journey and who have supported the book over these last few months. But now it's time to get different people back on the podcast again. You've been hearing my voice a lot, and you will still be hearing my voice as time goes on. But one of the main reasons I started this podcast was to have other people on the episodes as well, to be hearing different people's wisdom and perspective and experience and training. And that's what we're going to be returning to from this point on throughout the rest of the year. And this is going to be the first of these interviews. Now, I'm excited for the guests that we have this year because I feel the guests are a bit more varied than they were last year. Last year, we had lots of good people on, and I enjoyed all the interviews and got lots of feedback from you guys that you enjoyed them as well. Saying that, a lot of the interviewees were quite similar, and I recognize this. I recognize that quite a lot of the people who are coming on the show were coaches, speakers, trainers. They were a similar kind of breed, although of course they all were doing different work. And that of course reflects my personal network. And it's a reflection of myself because I speak and I train and I write these are the types of people who I meet quite often, and these are the people that I've built relationships with to bring them onto the podcast. Now, I think that these are great people to hear from, and you'll still be hearing from people with these kind of professions and these kinds of experiences. But this year, I want to bring you a little bit more variety. So we're going to be bringing people on the show who aren't necessarily in these fields at all. Perhaps they don't even own their own business of any description, whether it be coaching or speaking or being an author. We're looking kind of beyond the bounds of what we've been looking at so far on Author Your Life. So I'm excited to bring you some of these folks this year. We have a magician coming on at some point. We have a chess master coming on at some point. And I hope this isn't confirmed, but I hope to be having an athlete on at some point. So you can see that we're branching out into different fields, but we're still going to be looking at some of these common principles, some of the common principles of Author Your Life. How do we find happiness in our life? How do we find purpose in our life? How do we build good relationships in our life? We're going to be covering all these same things, but covering these things in a more diverse range of interviewees. So the first of these is going to be a gentleman called Rob Lawless, and that's who you're going to be hearing from on today's episode. And Rob is one of these varied guests. He's someone a little bit different, someone who I think is really interesting, and what he's doing is very interesting. And I'm sure you'll agree as you start to find out a little bit more about him and what he does. So who is Rob Lawless? Rob is on a mission to spend 1 hour, one-to-one, with 10,000 different people. And he's documenting their stories on his Instagram. Rob started this project in November of 2015. And since then, he's taken it full time, and he's met nearly 2,500 people already between Philadelphia, New York City, and Los Angeles in the US. He's been covered by several press sources, for example, Ryan Seacrest on his nationally syndicated radio show On Air With Ryan Seacrest. He's also been on big podcasts such as The Cal Fussman Show. And that was actually where I heard Rob on that particular podcast. I thought, wow, this guy is really interested in what he's doing. I'm going to try and get him on my podcast. And the reason why I was able to do this and to get Rob on the podcast is because in 2019, Rob is planning to take this project beyond the US. And that's going to be beginning with Great Britain. So I said, whoa, Rob, I've got a podcast in Great Britain and I cover several cities across the country. So this would be a great opportunity for some of the folks in the UK to meet you, to hear from you, and to connect with you before you come over here and start doing your mission. So that's what has brought Rob onto the podcast today. And some of the things that we talk about are how to choose a skill, something you're good at, and to develop your purpose from that. We talk about making your own path to success. Don't try to copy someone else. Why we need to stop thinking interaction needs an agenda, and don't aim for the overnight success. So we cover these topics and a whole lot more in this interview. Now, just before we launch in, I have an apology to make. Given the time difference that me and Rob had, we were able to coordinate a time. At this particular time, I was out and about, and I went into a cafe to do this particular interview. Now, I thought that I had my headphones in, and I didn't think too much of the cafe noise was going to come through my headphones. Unfortunately, quite a lot came through the headphones. So throughout this interview, I'm afraid to say you'll be hearing some Rihanna and some Calvin Harris coming through my side. You're going to hear some of the chatter. I wasn't aware on just how much background noise that my headphones were going to pick up. So that would be my first and last experiment doing an interview in a cafe. It was not a suitable environment for doing it. But I also didn't want to not publish this episode just because there's some background noise. Rob's voice is still nice and clear. You'll still hear all of the things that he's talking about and all the things that he's saying. So if you're able to just tune out some of that background ambiance, you're still going to have a great interview today, and learn about Rob's very interesting journey. So without any further preamble, please enjoy this interview with Rob Lawless. Rob, welcome to the Author Your Life podcast.
Thank you, man. Thank you for having me.
No worries. Now, Rob, you have a very interesting challenge going on at the moment, and this is something I'd like the audience to know a little bit more about. But I'd like to just take a little bit of a step back from explaining what it is. And can you tell us, why did you decide that you wanted to go out and meet 10,000 people?
Sure. So it's kind of a combination of two things. So I'm originally from the suburbs of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the States, and I went to college at Penn State University, which is in central Pennsylvania, and it's 40,000 students in a college town, so there's not much to do outside of that town. And when I was a student there, I got really involved in clubs and activities, and so I started to see these people that I became familiar with all the time on the way to class or in class or out at the bars, and that was something that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed that feeling of running into people that I knew, and so when I graduated, that was one of the harder transitions for me, going from this college life to this professional life, and it was something that I wanted to recapture. So that was one big piece, and then the other was I minored in entrepreneurship as a subject to study, and really wanted to go down a path where I was creating that path for myself. And so I majored in finance, started doing corporate consulting for Deloitte, and quickly realized that it just wasn't for me. And so I was always looking for an escape from the corporate life path, and kind of thinking about my strengths and what would be interesting to me. I thought if I met 10,000 people for 1 hour each, one-on-one, that it would just have to work out. So one, it would be really entertaining for me to go through that path, and two, I'm all about who you know, not what you know. And so I thought there's just got to be a point at which it works out that I can turn this idea into a career. And so I started in November of 2015, have since met over 2,200 people, and have been doing this full time for just over 2 years.
That's amazing. So you're a fifth of the way there. From those over 2,000 people, if you think back to each of them, are there any who have really stood out to you? Somebody shared a story, or they shared some life lessons or something that really sort of grabbed your interest and blew you away?
There's a handful of them. There's so many people that I've met who their lives have kind of changed my life or given me more perspective. One of my favorite stories is this guy Chris, who I met, who is a hotel concierge in Philadelphia. He was introduced to me through someone in the Instagram photography community, and so I thought he would have a pretty normal story, kind of like mine. And when I talked to him, I learned he was half German, half South African. He was raised in Nigeria in the early years of his life, and then when he was 16 years old, he was boating on the Hudson in New York with some of his friends, and he fell off of the boat, ended up getting run over by it, and his legs got sucked up into the engines. And so he described it to me as if essentially his legs were put in a blender, and they just got chopped up. The muscle got chopped off the bone. He lost 5 or 6 liters of blood, technically died on the way to the hospital, and was brought back to life. They gave him a 12% chance of ever walking again, and a 15% chance of living, and he beat both odds, and we walked around Philadelphia for an hour together during our time. So his story always sticks out to me because I think it's just so traumatic what happened to him. Mm-hmm. But then the fact that he overcame that and is now having this normal life after going through such an abnormal experience.
Yeah. So that type of story, and I'm sure that's not the only type of story that you've heard amongst all these people, is quite an intimate, open story to share with someone, bearing in mind that they've just met you and you've only got an hour together.
Sure.
How do you kind of open up that? How do you open up that openness? How do you get the conversation to a point where people are open and willing to share their life experiences and their life lessons with you?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I actually took note of that. Someone early on, I was doing like a short little radio interview, and they asked kind of a similar question, and I was thinking about it because I don't think that I do anything special to kind of get people to open up. I think what happens is they see that I've met with 2,200 other people and have shared their stories, and so I think people come into their meetings with me expecting to open up because they've seen other people do it. So I think it's just that, like, they think that that's how it goes, and a lot of times I'm just flowing with our conversation. If they want to keep it surface level the whole time, that's fine with me, but a lot of times they do dive deeper, and I think it is just because they've seen other people do that. And one of my skills that I've gained from doing this project is just being a good listener and being with people as they share their stories. And I'm sure you've experienced that to your podcast as well. If you're there and present and attentive to people, they almost want to give you more of themselves.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think a lot of people, they're dying to tell people about themselves and about their life, and maybe they don't have the people in their family or the friendship circle who they can really open up to. And I think that's why some people find therapy so helpful, is it's nothing that the therapist in particular might be doing. There's no psychological mind tricks or anything. It's just, oh my God, you're the first person who I've actually been able to say what's going on with me and what's going on in my life, and you're just sitting there and listening and being a welcome and accepting listener. Yeah, I think that is a lot of it. For thinking back to your first 50 people, this is obviously something you've built a lot more skill and a lot more confidence in doing. But was there anything that you did in the beginning where you felt, maybe that's not the best way to connect with people and that's not the best way to open up, I'm going to change and try and find something different to do?
Sometimes, I think so. Definitely in the first handful of people, I was more socially anxious than I am now. Now it's pretty routine and I'm pretty comfortable with it. And I was comfortable with people back then, but in the beginning, taking someone's hour with no agenda, an hour of their life, I felt pressure to make sure that they felt it was worth it. So there was a bit of that, but in the beginning days, it was more of me trying to fill an hour of conversation, because now I think from the skills I've gained, I can just flow with the conversation and casually take it in any direction. But in the beginning, I feel like I was asking more questions just to push people further along in terms of continuing the conversation and trying to get to know them. I remember there was one point in time when I was asking people, what do you want to do before you die? And then if you knew you were going to die tomorrow, what would you do? And it kind of gave some interesting answers, but a lot of it I feel like was repetitive from what I was getting, and I wasn't actually getting to know people. I was getting to know scenarios that likely weren't going to happen. So I've moved away from that, but I think that is just one example of the types of questions where I'd be like, how about this, or how about that? And instead of trying to fill time now, we're just flowing through an hour of conversation.
Yeah, It's interesting that you said you used the word repetitive and you were finding a lot of repetitive answers. Not so much in terms of repetitive, but are there any common themes or ideas that you hear consistently across all these different people as they're opening up and talking about themselves and talking about their lives?
A lot of people, when we just talk about what we want to do with our lives in general, a lot of people tell me that they want to help people, and I find that pretty encouraging and also interesting. I think a lot of people have this internal drive to just help the other people around them, which has made me think like maybe the way that we help people is inefficient, because sometimes I've heard of people who want to solve the same issue, but they both want to start their own nonprofit. So in a perfect world, they'd be like working together to solve this issue instead of having two different routes. And then another thing is that a lot of people they just don't know what they're doing in life, and in a good way. A lot of us don't have life figured out, and if we did, we wouldn't be where we are trying to get to the next level. And so that's been a common theme, where every time I say that to someone, like, none of us know what we're doing, everyone always breathes kind of a sigh of relief, like, yeah, I don't know. And so that's been something really comforting that I've found through talking with people, because I think a lot of times we go through life with this pressure that we have to live up to these standards that no one's really creating, but we're all trying to meet. And Instagram is a huge perpetuator of that. And that's another thing that I talk with people about, is just kind of the toxic environment that Instagram has created. And it's just interesting because we all have insecurities. We all have like bad days and stuff. And it's fun for me to be able to talk to people in a vulnerable state about that. And then sometimes I'll go and they'll agree with me, and then I'll go and look at their Instagram, and it's like posting pictures at the beach and trying to live this life. But I think it's an interesting take on just like what I've gathered from the people that I've met.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure a lot of people listening will be really glad that you shared that you've met so many people who don't know what they're doing in life, because a lot of people who I teach at my seminars and who watch my videos online and who listen to this podcast, they are people who are looking for their purpose, they're looking for their passion and their motivation in life. And sometimes I find this a really difficult question to answer for people, because I feel like, if I look at me personally, because you always use your own personal example when you're trying to connect with other people, I feel like I just kind of knew my purpose early on, found it and started engaging with it. And people say, I say, well, what do you enjoy doing? Or what do you think you'd like to do? And they say, I have no idea. I sometimes really struggle to sort of start connecting the dots for them. So this is something that I find really difficult to help people with, people who are searching for things in life. They're looking for that purpose. They're looking to know what they're doing in life. So I think it's really encouraging that you've shared that, and there are actually a load of people out there who feel a very similar way.
Oh yeah, and it's interesting too. I mean, I think most people in life are trying to find their purpose, and I feel like I found mine through this project, but I feel like an outlier, as if I found it at a really early age. So I was 24 years old when I started this, and the way I found it was just so I had come up with this idea to meet 10,000 people in 2014, and then it kind of sat in my iPhone notes for a little bit, because at the beginning I thought I would meet 10,000 people for 10 minutes each in 1 year, and that was more driven by me just wanting to become an overnight success than putting in the work. And so it didn't go anywhere. And when I started to switch into, okay, I want to build something over time that's going to take a really long time to do, but that's really fulfilling, that's when things started to click. But I had written like 3 journal entries, and they were all my iPhone notes, and in the second one I had written, my ability to meet people is what will take me to where I want to be. And so when I went to write the 3rd journal entry, I read that from the second one, and that was the motivation for me to kind of evaluate my life and say, I really am good at getting to know people. I've always been the nice guy, and this is something that I want to pursue in life. And so it's interesting. I feel like we have to kind of take a look at ourselves from the outside looking in to really diagnose what our passions are, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah. Just as you were saying that, I got this sort of picture of a diagram in my head where you looked at your skills and you said, I have this really good skill and ability to meet people. How can I use that skill? Whereas I think some people kind of start the other way. They sort of say, I want to be an entrepreneur. They think of the end result and they think, well, what business do I need to create in order to be a successful entrepreneur? You've kind of started the other way around, which I think is interesting. Is that something that you think is helpful for people to do, is look at a current skill or ability that they have and then try and grow it from there?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of, having studied entrepreneurship, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur too, and I think I used to approach it in the other way you were saying, where I remember hearing all the stories of people saying, I've eaten ramen noodles for a year, I'm staying up late and whatnot, I'm sacrificing this and I'm sacrificing that, and I thought that I would just have to start sacrificing those things in order to, have this entrepreneurial journey. But what I realized is when I started this project, I still wanted to go out to the bars with my friends and stuff. I still wanted to eat well, and I was doing that, and I always justified it as the fact that I think this project will be successful someday, and so I can still do these things now. But then over time, my mindset just started to switch, where I said to myself, if I don't go out to the bars, that's like $50 more I have in my pocket, and that could keep me going another week for this project, and I'd rather do another week of this project than another night out at the bars. And so what I thought I needed to sacrifice just casually became something I wanted to sacrifice. Felt like a common sense move towards success in the project. And so, yeah, I feel like at first I thought I had to do all these things, but it wasn't. I just had to do the project that I was passionate about, and those things would kind of happen along the way.
Mm-hmm. What you were just speaking about there raises something that I've spoken about in the last couple of interviews on the podcast, talking about balancing this need for accomplishment and progression and moving forward and having growth with also being happy and enjoying yourself along the way. For example, the example you just gave of eating ramen noodles for a year and going in startup mode and working 16-hour days on something isn't very happy and isn't very fulfilling. Can you still have the growth and progression without having to eat ramen noodles for a year? For you, I can hear you're sort of talking about a balance that you found. What do you think is the secret or the essence of finding that balance between still having this drive and this determination to move things forward and chase your dreams and chase what makes you passionate, but at the same time being happy and content in the process?
That's a good question. I think for me, it's just balanced because I love what I'm doing so much. And I think that is the issue I had earlier, where there are people who graduated from Penn State. 3 guys. They started this company called Weebly, and they're big in if you're familiar with Weebly, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so I had become friendly with them from the times they would come back to Penn State and speak about their company. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, sorry.
I lost you just as you're saying they came back to Penn. These 3 guys came back to Penn.
Okay, yeah, so the guys who founded Weebly were Penn State graduates, and they would come back and speak to our school every year, and so I became friendly with them, and they were friends with people like Drew Houston, who founded Dropbox, and Steve Huffman, who co-founded Reddit. And I would see all these guys and think, I need to build a tech company. And when I found this and found like a passion that involved people, I just loved it. I didn't have this desire to be an entrepreneur through a path I thought was just the right path. I found it through something that I actually wanted to do. And for me, doing the project, it was kind of on my own terms of success. And I think that's why I was willing to balance it with the other sacrifices that I needed to make along the way.
Oh, that's really interesting. My own terms of success, I really like that phrase. I think that might be the essence of it, that I think in our society we're so often shown what success is and what success should be, whether that is you're supposed to go into corporate or you're supposed to go into medicine or law, or whether you're supposed to be an entrepreneur. That's almost becoming like a thing that you're supposed to do, and it's like cool to do is to be an entrepreneur and start your own business. But actually I think it is really just about yourself, and again, going back to what you were saying earlier about finding a skill, finding something that you're good at and lights you up, and then using that and developing and evolving that in your own particular way rather than trying to follow someone else's framework.
Yeah, and I think the goals too change. I think when I was younger, I wanted to be like a multi-millionaire or a billionaire or something like that, and now I just realized once I started finding happiness through my project that my mindset shifted from I want to make all of this money to I just want to make enough money to continue doing this thing that I know makes me happy and gives me purpose. And so now in my life, I'd like to be financially comfortable in my life, but that could happen with like what they say $70,000 a year is the salary that once you go past that, you're not much happier. So I may get to $70,000 a year of income through this in some way, and that could be cool with me, instead of having to put pressure on myself to become a millionaire, because maybe I take the time that it would have taken to get more money and I invest that in my friends and family, and that's a more rewarding use of my time than the other way.
Yeah, yeah, I totally agree. So we've covered a little bit about the 10,000 challenge and the reasons kind of behind it, and some of the things you've been learning and discovering from it. I like to shift a little bit more into talking more about the almost like the practicalities of how this works and how you go through it. So you're meeting these 10,000 people. What is your routine for meeting people? How do you go about it?
So I try to meet 4 people a day. There were times when I was meeting 5 people a day, but now I'm living in the suburbs, so I'll give you my Philly routine is I meet people at 10 a.m., noon, 2 p.m., and 4 p.m. So I wake up, I drive into the city. From 10 to 11, I'm sitting with someone, and we're just kind of chatting essentially how you and I are right now. And then at the end of that, so from 11 a.m. until noon, I have 1 hour to write their story, post it to Instagram, and drive to the next spot. And so I'll do that, and everything I write is from memory because it's just a conversation that I'm having with people, and I've always wanted it to be just that, a conversation between 2 people, them getting to know me as much as I'm getting to know them, and then from what I remember, just crafting a story out of it. But I do that from 11 to noon. From noon to 1, I'm meeting someone. 1 to 2, I'm writing their story. 2 to 3, meeting someone. 3 to 4, writing. 4 to 5, meeting. Then driving back home to the suburbs, writing and posting their story. And then in the nighttime, just messaging people back to set up times for the following week. So it's a lot of meeting, writing, and then just corresponding with people and sending calendar invites and confirming that they're still on. So there are a lot of behind-the-scenes logistics that actually make the flow of meeting 4 people a day a reality.
So what about today? Because we are speaking at 9 a.m. your time. So how does your day schedule look like just now? Do I count as one of your 4 appointments, or are you doing this interview and then you're going to meet 4 people as well?
So I'm doing this, and then I'm going to go meet 3 people. So today, Black Friday in the States, is kind of a day where most people just take off to go shopping. And my older brother is home from New York City, so I knew I didn't want to have a full day. So I'm home here doing this with you, and then I'm meeting someone at 11, 1, and 3 p.m. And then tonight I'm going to get together with high school friends. So, and that's the beauty of doing this. I can kind of ramp up or ramp down my schedule as I need to.
Yeah. How do you pick people, or how do people pick you? Because now that you've done so many, for example, I heard of you through a podcast, so I approached you. Right. Do people approach you and that's how you fill up your appointments, or do you kind of headhunt people and say, I'd like to find out a little bit more about this type of person or this industry? How do you go around making these appointments with people?
In the beginning, it was just me reaching out to people that I thought were interesting, and I would just hit them up through email or Instagram DMs and explain the concept of what I was doing. But after I met 65 people, I started getting press, and so from every press article, I'd get a jump of interest from people. But the biggest way it's grown is just through me meeting with someone and then reposting our photo to their Instagram and saying, hey, I met with Rob, he's doing this cool project, we talked about this, you DM him if you want to be part of it. And so being 2,200 people into the project, when people hear about it now, they think it's a cool concept. I think it's mature enough where they actually believe that I might complete this goal. I've always known that I'm going to complete it, but when you say you're going to meet 10,000 people and you've only met 30, people kind of question you. When you've met over 2,000, they listen a little bit more. But now I just get messages from friends of the people that I've met, and it's just constantly growing outwards. And then, podcasts have helped a lot. And in July, I was interviewed for 5 minutes by a popular figure over here, Ryan Seacrest. I was on his radio show, and so those things all push the project along.
Yeah, it's really funny what you said. Like, people take you seriously after 2000, because I think the amount of people who I've met who are like, I'm going to make a $1 billion business. I'm like, okay, let me see your first $1,000, and then we'll see how you go from there. I think, yeah, I'm going to meet 10,000 people. People like, right, okay, but now that you're 2,000 in, and that's what interested me so much when I heard about you. I was like, whoa, this guy's actually doing it. He's already put in 2,000 hours into this project. Like, he's going places. I think he's actually going to do it, and he's going to make the 10,000 mark. And because I know that you're going to get there, I'm really interested to see what the journey is going to be like and what the progress is going to be like, because I've said this when we first started speaking. I think it's going to be really interesting when you get to the end, because you've met all these people, learned so much about human nature and human experience, that whatever you take from it, I think is going to be really interesting, can really kick on into something exciting.
Yeah, and that's part of the fun for me, is just I have no idea where this is going to go to, and so I feel like I'm kind of on this roller coaster for the first time, and it sometimes it twists and turns and loops, and I take it all in stride. And for me, it's exciting to live that type of life where there is uncertainty and there's excitement and surprise, and that's part of why the project fits my personality so well. And even just talking about the 2200, or just proving to people, I think that's been one of the lessons I've learned along the way, is that people see you for how much progress you've made already. Internally, I think we struggle sometimes because we see ourselves with what we know our potential to be. We want other people to view us based off of our potential, but they're really just basing us off of the value that we've created so far. And we look at other people, and when they come to us, we say, all right, well, what's the value you've created so far? Like, we'll only base ourselves off of our potential. We don't do it for other people. And so I've had to remind myself of that sometimes when a certain publication didn't want to answer my emails, or a company didn't want to partner with me. Maybe I'm just not up to that value yet. It doesn't mean I won't get there. It's just that what I see in my head, they can't see yet, because it's not into existence yet.
So looking at this routine, meeting 4 people each and every day throughout the week, how do you keep your energy and your focus up during the day? Because conversation, even if you're an extrovert and you enjoy speaking and you enjoy conversing with people, when you're meeting someone new and you're getting into conversation and doing all the traveling and the blogging about it that you do as well, how do you keep your energy and focus up during the day? Are there any practices or habits that you find helpful for that?
So I will say a lot of it is just the fact that that's my personality. I'm extremely in that sense. I get a lot of energy from meeting people. I think from a more practical standpoint, when I wake up in the mornings and I work out before, that helps me a lot, because I just get a boost of energy from being active in the morning. And then just eating. I still pack like a grade school, like a kid's lunch, but that's just a mode of survival for me right now. But I've noticed, like, if I eat my sandwich after my first meeting, then that kind of gives me the energy. Like, for the second meeting, then I'll have like a protein bar after the second meeting and some other snacks. And if I balance that out, I'm always having this constant energy from the food I'm eating to kind of push me through. And here and there, I'll have cups of coffee in between. I meet people at coffee shops all the time, but if anything, I'm having like 1 cup of coffee a day. And if I do need a boost sometimes, I will turn to that. But for the most part, it is just my favorite way of entertaining myself is talking to people. So it's just naturally, it gives me energy to keep going.
Okay. So, taking these interactions wider and broader, when I look around the world right now, I see a lot of disconnection and a lot of poor interaction and poor relationships, both on an individual level and also collectively, the way that we're getting on with each other as a human race. There's a lot of disconnection here, and what you're doing with your project is you're really building and living in connection. So looking at what you're doing and looking to the world as a larger whole, how do you think we can bring more love and more connection into the world?
Yeah, so I think I think we just need to create an environment where random human connection is okay. Because I think a lot of times people in the real world, there has to be some type of agenda to you meeting, because everyone thinks everyone else has their group of friends already set, and if you're meeting someone, there has to be a business purpose to it, or it has to be for dating or something like that, otherwise you don't have time for them. But I found that there's a lot of value in human connection that we don't think about, and that can come in terms of a perspective, like opening your perspective and going through life being more thankful for something that you were grateful for before. Or it could come in the sense that you just have one other face to see around the neighborhood that makes you feel like you belong there. One of the greatest things that this project has given me is just an excuse to go out and meet with people. Because people will meet with me because for them it's bigger than just sitting together for an hour. They're part of this thing now. And one of the things that I kind of feel a responsibility to help spread human connection now, having done this project. In 2019, I'm going to do this 12-friend challenge where I'm encouraging people to meet one new person each month in 2019, and I'm going to put out a how-to guide of here are the resources you could use to connect with another person. It could be Shaper, which is a networking app that I worked with. It could be Bumble BFF. It could be like LinkedIn or whatever. And here are some talking points, or here are some questions that you could be armed with to go into a conversation. And so I just want to take what I've learned and give that to other people. And then through this challenge, give them the excuse that I've had, so that when they meet with people, they're meeting to kind of satisfy this challenge and it's part of something bigger than just that one meeting.
Mm-hmm. So, Rob, I'm aware that we've got a hard stop approaching. You have people to go out and meet today. So with that in mind, I've got a few final questions to finish off on. But just because they're the final questions, don't feel that you have to give short or succinct answers. They are as long as you want them to be.
Sure.
The first of these questions is, where do you think this challenge is going to go? How would you like to build this challenge and evolve this challenge after you've ultimately met 10,000 people?
Yeah, so along the way, I think it will expand geographically, which is awesome, and I appreciate you having me on the podcast to kind of help in that way in a little bit. One of my goals in 2019 is to get over to Great Britain, and I was hoping to do it in January. Still potentially could happen. We'll see, but I hope that when I look back on this project after completing it, that it spanned all different countries across the world, and that I came in touch with all different types of people. And so when I'm done, I think I'll still continue meeting people, maybe not with another goal, but just casually because I want it to be part of my life. And then helping other people, I want people to look at my project and say, that dude achieved a level of success that I want in my life, and so I'm going to go out and try to meet 1,000 people or 5,000 people or 10,000. And if that starts to happen, I'd like to be a resource for those people in guiding them down that path, maybe consulting them in some type of way. And then on top of that, and kind of me wanting to foster a culture of human connection, I really think at universities that there's an opportunity to have a freshman seminar where one class of these, for the freshmen, is sitting down from their classmates one-on-one each class period and just talking about their lives and getting to know each other, and then writing what they've learned about each other afterwards, because I think that you then give students the opportunity to feel more comfortable in this place that they're definitely nervous to start at. You're creating bonds that could be future spouses, future business partners, future friendships, and I want to have a hand in providing the environment for that to happen. So that's kind of where I see it going. And yeah, I'm excited. I truly believe that, like, there was a time when I had met one person and no one knew about my project. And I was documenting these stories, and no one was following it. And then there was a time when I had met 100 people, and 100 people were following it, and every once in a while they'd comment. And now I've met 2,000 people, and 20,000 people are following it. And I think you can start with something really small, and over time grow it into something really big. And so 10 years from now, when this is over, who knows, it could be something really big of other people always meeting each other. And that for me would be awesome. I think that would be like one of the greatest successes I could achieve through the project.
We were talking just before we came on air. You mentioned Black Friday is today, which meant, of course, Thanksgiving was yesterday. And one of the things that I'm really big about in my personal life and in my work is the power of gratitude, the power of appreciation. So this is probably very much still in the forefront of your mind, Rob. But what would you say you're grateful for in life?
So many things, a ton of things, and a lot of those things I've realized that I am supposed to be or should be grateful for through the project. And so the biggest thing is my upbringing and my family. I think a lot of who I am today was shaped by the experiences I've had in my past. And I come from a family where my parents are still married, still happy, still together. We live in the house that we had, or that they had built when they got married. We're the only family who's ever lived here. I'm the youngest of three. Both my siblings are doing well. My older brother does consulting in New York City. My sister does marketing in Philadelphia. And so I've had this really tight-knit, stable upbringing throughout my life that has allowed me to clearly approach things like college when I was in school, think about tests. And so I was able to do well academically. And I now know a lot of that came from just the way that I was raised. So that, and then aside from that, the friends that I've made through high school and college, it's funny because I have this mission to meet 10,000 new friends, but I am really, really close with the friends that I do have already, and they're like family to me. So I'm grateful, and I tell them all the time, like, of all the gifts that I've been given in life, my friendships with them are definitely like top 10. I would take seeing my friends or having that friendship over a mansion or a car or anything material any day of the week. So those are the biggest things that I think about. And then I'm just grateful. It all kind of cascades, right? Like, I think about it, that upbringing allowed me to do well at Penn State, which allowed me to get a good job coming out of college, which allowed me to build up a savings account, which allowed me to take this full time, which allowed me to be 2,200 people into this thing I'm really passionate about. And so grateful for all of it, and just grateful for the opportunity to be on this path and to have discovered my passion at an early age. Because I think it's all tied together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I asked you just a moment ago about where you see the project growing and developing and what you'd like to happen after that. I like to fast forward a little bit further on in life and look into when you're at the end of your life and you're looking back over the life that you've led and the time that you've had here on Earth. What legacy would you like to have left when that final day comes for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, well, one without thinking about it in terms of a legacy, when I'm on my deathbed and I look back, I just want to look back and be like, that was an awesome adventure, and I had a good time going through that life. And whenever people ask me what the end goal of my project is, I always say it's simply to look back and say, I spent my 20s and 30s in a badass way, and I hope that continues afterwards. But I do, if human connection becomes something that is fostered, I'd love to have a legacy of someone who kind of pulled us back into a place of sitting down with each other when technology was starting to push us in the opposite direction. And yeah, someone who made an impact in the world. I think I would like my name to live on after myself, and I think once I have stability through this project, when I have more free time that doesn't involve always meeting people, I think it will involve a lot of helping people. doing things like I used to do Habitat for Humanity trips in college where we build houses for people in need, and so doing things like that where I'm not just sitting in my house and like donating with checks and stuff. I really want to use my time to get out there and be with people and make an impact in that way. So that, I guess that's kind of a vague answer, but just those types of things. And then I hope that I have kids and grandkids someday, and that I'm shaping directly these individuals in my life, that I leave a legacy in that sense, a legacy of grandkids that are shaping the world in their own way, using me as kind of the inspiration of how they were raised. Sure. They can hit me up on Instagram. My handle is @robs10kfriends, and that is where I do most of my communication with people. That's where I post the picture with everyone that I've met and their stories. So the project is mainly operating out of Instagram. I'm also on Twitter and Facebook as well, with the same Robs10kfriends. But yeah, hit me up if they're listening in Scotland. As you know, it is a good time to get over there, and so maybe someday I'll be in your area, and you and I will be sitting down together face to face instead of through Skype.
That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Rob, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd appreciate it hugely if you could head over to iTunes and leave a rating and review for the podcast. With your review, please be as honest and detailed as you can be, because with honest and detailed feedback, that helps me to adapt and grow this podcast to most serve you, the listener. Also, if you enjoyed this episode, then make sure you subscribe to the podcast. That way you aren't going to miss any of the future episodes that we've got lined up for you. Until next time, remember that you are the author of your life. You hold the pen, and you can write whatever script you want for yourself. So go out today and write yourself a beautiful story.